Hello, I'm Sarah from wowenglish.co.uk and I'm here today with a video lesson all about First Language English Paper 1 Question 2, looking at those short vocabulary questions. So let's get straight into it. If you're following along on YouTube, then all of the papers that you'll need today are just down linked in the description. If you're following along as part of my video course, you'll find the course materials just at the side where it says lesson materials. And otherwise, you can find plenty more free resources over on my website at wowenglish.co.uk. So we are looking at the language question, which is question 2 on paper 1. And just in case you guys didn't know, this is what paper 1 looks like. So you begin with some comprehension questions, then the summary, then you'll do these vocabulary questions that we're looking at today, followed by language analysis, and finally onto a larger writing piece. The text that you'll have to read and will have to answer the vocabulary questions on will be text C. So you'll study 3 texts, and this is text C, the third and most difficult text. You can expect that it will usually be a narrative here, something more like a story or something like that. And it will be the most difficult of the 3 texts. It's the same text that you'll also go on to do your language analysis question for, as well as that longer question 3. So this is really giving you a chance to get to grips with the question before you approach those harder questions. Actually, CIE are being quite kind to you here by giving you a chance to answer some easier questions and build up your confidence before making you do something a little bit harder. So right now we'll take off our hat and say thank you, CIE. I'm sure later on when we have a look at the mark scheme, you won't be saying thank you, CIE anymore. So in this question, you're going to be tested on basically your ability to find synonyms and give definitions, as well as give a basic explanation of what a particular quote might mean. So building you up to think about the writer's effect. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you tips for each of those 3 sections of this question, give you a little bit of advice, but then I'm just going to send you away to go and do it. After you've done it, we'll come back to the video lesson and we'll go through the answers together. So having a look at my advice then for part A. So part A is relatively simple. Basically, you will have a word or phrase underlined and then you'll have to go back to the text and find a word or phrase that means the same thing. So it's basically, can you go away and copy down a synonym? So here's an example on the screen. Identify a word or phrase from the text which suggests the same idea as the words underlined. And here you have to find a word or phrase that means the same as sparkling in the sunshine. My advice then is copy directly from the article. For the love of God, please do not paraphrase or try to write in your own words. The question is specifically asking, can you copy down something from the text? So make sure that whatever you're copying down covers all parts of the underlined section. So for example here, where it says sparkling in the sunshine, whatever you copy down needs to contain the same idea as sparkling in the sunshine, rather than just sparkling or just sunshine. So sometimes you might only need to copy down 1 word, sometimes you might need to copy down like 3 or 4 words. Whatever you're copying down, try to make sure that it encompasses the same meaning as everything underlined in that question there. This question should hopefully be relatively straightforward as long as you know what the words mean. Obviously, if you don't know what the words mean, it's a little bit harder, but at least you can have a guess, right? Because if you're not sure, well, you go through and you find whatever you think is the closest and just copy it down and you might get lucky and get the mark. I would definitely say for this section, I would be really disappointed if I saw that one of my students hadn't even tried to have a guess, because it is just copying down. So no matter what, you don't lose marks, you can only gain marks. Put something in here, don't leave it blank. Next then, my advice for part B. So this is kind of similar to part A, except now they are giving you a word or phrase and you have got to give your own definition or synonym of that word or phrase. So here's an example. It says, using your own words, explain what the writer means by each of the words underlined. And you have to give a definition for the word increasing. So this is all coming from your own brain. You have to try to just think of a synonym, essentially, right? It's not any more complicated than that, and you don't need to write in full sentences. You can simply answer with 1 word, and that would be enough. My advice, and I've said this to you before for question 1, which is when you're given a definition, don't repeat the word that you're trying to define in your definition. So here the word is increasing. So you definitely wouldn't want to say, this means that something increases, right? You don't repeat that same word to define the word. Think of a new word to try and give a definition. Also think really carefully about the meaning of the word, the kind of the deeper implications of the word, because if it's something that is a comparative, right? So if they wanted you to define bigger, then you'd have to say larger. You couldn't just say large. So if the word is bigger, you'd have to say larger, right? So if it's a comparative, use a comparative in your definition. Or if it's something like grow up, where you've got one of these phrasal verbs with a preposition, grow up, you couldn't just say grow, right? So you need to think really carefully about the word and the structure of the word, right? The type of word that's being used there to make sure that you really give an accurate definition. Finally, then, my advice for part C. So, part C is one that students get a little bit stressed about, although I don't really think that it's worth your stress, your energy, because it's only worth 3 marks. But often, students make silly mistakes in this one purely from not reading the question accurately. If you have a look at the question then, it says, use one example, repeat, one example from the text below to explain how the writer suggests the father's experiences and feelings as he starts the sharp incline on the hill. Use your own words in your explanation. Let me just draw your attention to a couple of things here. So firstly, use one example. This is a mistake that my higher level students often make because they want to show off how much they know, and actually it's really, really bad to do that when the question has specifically told you only give one example. So you should only be giving one quote, right? Don't select different quotes to be like, hey, look at me, I really understand what this is about, because you're not going to meet the mark scheme if you do that. So just one example. The command word here is explain. So you're not analysing, you are explaining. You're just simply stating 3 different things about your quote. You don't need to analyse language devices, you don't need to analyse connotations or symbolism or imagery. You don't need to go that deep. You're just trying to say, what does it suggest, right? What does it suggest about the father's experiences? So here you can talk about his experience and his feelings. So how did he feel about it and what was it like? And really important, it says, use your own words in your explanation. So actually here, if you accidentally or on purpose copy from the text too much in your explanation, even if the point that you're making is correct, you will not be awarded the mark. So make sure that you are paraphrasing, that you are rewriting it using your own words, that you are using synonyms, because if you copy too much, lost the mark, sorry. So my advice here is make sure that you pick one short quote and that you use your speech marks, right? So those speech marks signal to the examiner that you have actually gone away and you have picked your one example. So you should do that. Don't copy directly from the text in your explanation. And remember, I haven't written it down, but there are 3 marks available. So there are 3 marks available, so make sure that you make 3 different points about your quote. If you just make 1 point and go into really great detail and do some analysis and connotations, you're still only going to get 1 mark because you've only made 1 point, right? So you need to make 3 quick points about your quote and move on. CIE give, I think, 3 or 4 lines for you to answer this question. You don't need to go beyond that. It should be just, here's a quote and this suggests bam, 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 full stop, move on, right? Don't waste your time here when you have got so much more to do later on in the exam. A 3-mark question does not deserve any more than 3 to 4 minutes of your time. Okay then, so it is over to you. I think it's really important for students just to do these questions and then they'll get a better understanding of exactly what the exam wants. So I'm going to send you away now to go and do these questions. As I've said, you can find all of the resources down in the description or in the lesson materials. Do those questions and then after you've finished, come back to this video where we'll go through the mark scheme together and talk about maybe some of the common mistakes that students make. Before you go away, just remember one last time my advice, which is pay close attention to the number of marks available for that last question, part C. Make sure you're giving 3 different points. And remember, don't repeat words when you're trying to define what the word means. So if the word is increasing, don't say that something increases. Pause the video now, go away and do those questions, and then come back. Have fun. Welcome back, and I hope that you had a good time trying to answer those questions. Now we're going to go through the mark scheme. Have a different coloured pen in hand so that you can mark your work. Tick any that you got correct, and if there are any that you think you could improve or you didn't quite get the right answer, make sure you write down what the correct answer was so that you've got that there in your notes. Alright, so looking at question 2a and the first question, you had to find a synonym in the text for sparkling in the sunshine, and the answer was winking. So that's all that you needed, the word winking. If you did write Sunny's phone screen winking or Sunny's phone screen winking at me from the window, that's fine, you also got it right, but all that you needed was the word winking. Bear in mind, if you wrote anything other than that, if you wrote winking and blah 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 blah, it's wrong. Because CIE want to see that you understand precisely the exact word or phrase that means the same thing. So even if you've got winking, if you put something else additional there, you have got that wrong. So cross it out and write a little note to yourself. Don't include any extra irrelevant information. And make sure that you did copy directly from the text. So CIE didn't want you to write it in your own words, they wanted you to copy it from the text. Part 2. So you had to find a word or phrase that meant a new, exciting experience. And the answer was novel adventure. So you can see here that new and exciting is covered by the word novel, and experience is covered by the word adventure. If you just wrote novel or you just wrote adventure, it's wrong. You have to have both novel and adventure. And part 3. So you needed to find a word or phrase that meant a significant stage in his life. And there are 2 possible answers that you could have had here. So you can have milestone or big 5-0. We say that sometimes to refer to someone's age to show that it is a big and important birthday. Like you can say, oh, you turn in the big 3-0, you turn in the big 7-0. So that definitely suggests that it's significant, right? So those are the 2 things that you could have had. And then finally, part 4 for this first part of the question, you needed to find a word or phrase that meant the same as record the entire bicycle ride on his mobile phone. So the correct answer was capture the whole event or make an official birthday video. You would not have been allowed to have Sunny capturing every second. And I think that is because if you look at the verb forms, record, capture, make, so those are all used in present simple tense. Whereas here, Sunny capturing every second, here we've got the ing, the continuous, and I wonder if that's why CIE think that it's not quite the same meaning. Because one here is planning to do it in the future, like he plans to do it, and one here is that he is doing it in the moment. So I think that's slightly changed the meaning, and that's why CIE wouldn't allow you to do that. So just be careful with the verb form. Remember, you're trying to copy out something that has got the same meaning. So if the verb form changes, it does change the meaning. So just be really, really careful there. Looking now at question 2, part B, and this is the section where you had to give your own definitions. Right, this here is one where my students, I'll have like half of the class with their hands up like, what about this one? What about this one? What about this one? I'm going to say words here and maybe you won't have all of these written down, or maybe you won't have any of them written down. If you want to double check, what I suggest you do is you go to dictionary.com or thesaurus.com and type in the word on the exam, and if your word comes up, then probably you would have got the mark. But if it doesn't, you probably didn't get the mark, and there might have been a better definition that you could give for the most part. CIE generally to examiners will say it must be on the mark scheme. Obviously there's a little bit of leeway because we can't predict every single word that a student might say, and maybe they might say one that we hadn't thought of that does turn out to be right. But for the most part, I would hope to see that you would have a word on the mark scheme in order for you to get that point correct. So the first word that you had to give a definition for was increasing. And notice here that all of the definitions have a sense of rising, right? Of becoming more and more. And most of them have got the verb form ing, right, which suggests that more and more, they're continuous, right? So you could have had become greater, notice there it's a comparative er, rising, ing, becoming worse, intensifying, building up, and growing. So notice there that most of them end in ing, and that's to emphasize the more and more and more. So it must have a sense of rising. And if you use the word increase anywhere in your definition, that's definitely wrong, okay? I hope that I've managed to hammer that particular point into your head by now. Let's have a look at the next two questions, which are a little bit more controversial. So take a deep breath to calm yourself before we go through these answers. Get your pens out, get ready to mark. So next, you had to give a definition, for the word notorious. So CIE say that you could have had widely known, generally and unfavourably known, famous or infamous, reputed for, well known. Let me level with you. I highly disagree with CIE on this question. I just think that some of these definitions are wrong, to be quite honest. To me, the word notorious means infamous. It means famous for a bad reason. If someone called me notorious, I would be like, huh? Why? What have I done? It's definitely got bad connotations. But CIE say that you can just have the word famous or widely known, which to me isn't conveying the bad side of the word notorious. But we'll say fine, and we'll bow down to our almighty God CIE and say fine, you know best, these are the correct answers. I would say for your own personal satisfaction though, of you knowing that your English is right generally, like not just in an exam but in the world, because there's more to life than the exam, right? I would say that for you to feel personally satisfied, I would want to see famous for a bad reason, infamous, reputed for a bad, like something about a bad reason or bad connotation. I would want to see that. But if you have just written the word famous, fine, you can have the mark. But if you said that in real life, you would be wrong. Whatever. Let's move on to the next question. Also equally slightly annoying, but here we go. Welcome to CIE. So you needed to find a word or phrase, so you needed to give a definition for dismayed. So CIE say that you could have confidence shaken, demoralised, discouraged, dispirited, disheartened, disconcerted, despairing, alarmed, shocked, appalled. But you cannot have, and it says this explicitly on the mark scheme, you cannot have upset or disappointed. Why exactly does dismayed mean the same as shocked? Because those two words aren't synonyms, but you can't have disappointed. Who knows? Like sometimes the logic is not clear to anyone, but this is what the mark scheme says, so this is what you should mark it for. So you can't have upset or disappointed, but you can have anything over here on the PowerPoint. Now we're going to have a look at question 2, part C, which is where you had to give an explanation. So I'm not going to go through this full mark scheme because it obviously depends on whichever quote you picked out. Firstly, I would say have a look at your work and highlight wherever you picked out one quote. Have you just given one quote? If you've given more than one quote, that's not such a good answer. I doubt you're going to be able to get more than 1 or maybe 2 marks at best. You wouldn't be able to get 3 marks. Have you even given a quote? If you have not got a quote anywhere there, if you can't find speech marks, you've got a 0 because you haven't answered the question. So there's the first step to having a look at your work. Now have a look and see if your quote was a good one. Obviously you could quote something other than what's on the screen right now, but probably if you quoted something else, it wasn't a very good quote. There probably isn't a lot to say about it. Again, I doubt you would have got more than 1 at a push 2 marks for it. So the next step is, have you got a quote? And if so, is your quote one of these on the screen? Now, have a look at your writing and see, have you said roughly the same thing as on the mark scheme? And have you given 3 different points? If you have given 3 different points, then just tick those 3 different points where you think that they are. For example, if you picked the phrase contorted expression, for 1 mark, shows grimacing, 2 marks, features appear distorted, 3 marks, suggests his face is twisted in pain, right? Then that would be a 3-mark answer. It's no more complex than that. You didn't need to do any language analysis like I said earlier. So take a second, pause the screen, have a look at the mark scheme. How many marks do you think that you got? So as a reminder, make sure you pick just one short quote and that you did use speech marks. Remember, don't copy directly for the text in your explanation. It should come from your own words. And remember, there's 3 marks, so you have to give 3 different points in order to achieve the full 3 marks. So on the screen now is an example answer. I want you guys to have a little think, how many marks do you think that this got and why? The phrase sigh of relief is used to demonstrate the extreme emotions of the narrator. The word sigh represents how tired his legs were, and relief suggests the sensation of joy when the experience was almost completed. Therefore, the phrase shows the feeling of desperation yet happiness at the same time. How many marks do you think that this answer got and why? So this is a 3-mark answer. Maybe you're surprised, maybe you're not. I think it shows you how straightforward your answer needs to be. So you've literally got a quote, the phrase sigh of relief, blah, 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 is used to demonstrate this, this, and this, 3 marks, done. And you can see that they got a mark for saying how tired his legs were, the sensation of joy, and the feeling of desperation yet happiness at the same time. That's where they gained those 3 marks. How similar is yours to this answer? Did you give enough detail? Maybe you were too detailed and you wasted too much time in it. Have a little think to yourself, how do you compare with this answer? So to sum up my advice for the question 2 short answer vocabulary questions then, these are the things that I think you need to remember for your exam. Make sure you define all of the words. So if you're asked to define a phrase with 2 words in it, make sure your definition covers both of those 2 words. Remember that 3 marks means 3 different points for question 2C. Make sure you're giving 3 separate points in order to achieve the full 3 marks. Don't define a word by reusing the same word in your definition. So don't say that increasingly shows that something increases. Make sure you say a completely new word in your definition. And don't forget in question 2C to include a quote, and that should use speech marks. Finally then, I want you guys in your notebooks to write a reflection. What did you find easy about these questions, and what did you find a little bit more challenging? When you next do these questions, what will you do differently and why? Make sure that you do this reflection so you can see how you will make that improvement next time. And that's everything I have to say for today's video class. I do hope that it was useful. Make sure that you subscribe to my channel and head on over to wowenglish.co.uk for more of this if you liked it. Goodbye.